efficient, right? So with the Black Business School, we had to be very capital efficient. We couldn't go and spend millions of dollars and everything else. A lot of HBCUs, I believe, make that mistake. I think they overspend. They have way too much infrastructure, and also they're trying to behave too similarly to existing institutions. I think an HBCU should be creative in terms of how it makes its money, how it educates its students, how it spends its money, etc. Like I'll give you a real good example. It's probably just it's a little bit awkward, but even Tyler Perry. Like I don't watch any Tyler Perry movies. I'm not gonna lie. I don't like Tyler Perry movies that much, but I admire the fact that Tyler was able to think outside the box and build, some infrastructure there, right? So what Tyler did, I talked to Tyler one time in 2014. He called me. I told you I'd never call these celebrities; they call me. And he'd heard of me or something, and we talked on the phone for a few minutes. And he was very nice to me, actually. His number two in command gave me a tour of the old studio, the entire 2.5 hour tour. So I got to see it all. I gained a lot of admiration for what he's accomplished there. Although I don't agree with like have most of the movies that come out of it. I don't like all that Medea stuff. But but one thing that Tyler said that was interesting, and we talked about that for a second, is he said I didn't go to. He was talking about Spike Lee, and at that time, if you remember, Spike Lee was pretty critical of Tyler Perry. He's kind of said some stuff about him being a buffoonery and coonery and buffoonery and all that. And I didn't disagree totally with Spike. I understood where he's coming from, but I kind of felt like he was kind of harsh. So, but one thing Tyler said was he said, "Look, I didn't go to film school like everybody else, And I said, "That's your advantage is that you didn't go to film school, so you figured it out on your own, and you were able to question a lot of the assumptions that people from film school don't question, like the way a movie gets made, how much money you have to spend on a scene or whatever. There's no rules on that. We just make the rules up as we go along. And as a result, Tyler Perry was able to shoot like I think that he said something like in Hollywood, they might shoot 2 episodes a week and he might shoot 10 episodes a day or 5 episodes a day. It was something crazy like that. So he was able to be more efficient and generate a higher profit margin for Tyler Perry Studios. And I admired that immensely. And because that was our thinking with the Black Business School, I said, we could probably do more with $100,000 than a lot of people can do with 1 million because we're not stifled with the bureaucracy or the old line of thinking. You have to be efficient with Black organizations in order for them to grow because you ain't white. Sometimes we forget. We think we're white. We think that we're supposed to be able to pour millions of dollars into stuff or even filmmaking. I see filmmakers that'll spend their whole life savings making a movie and then they lose all their money. It's like, well, what's your plan? How did you plan on getting your money back? Did you just think you were going to just throw $300,000 into this movie and have it be okay? No, you got to figure out like how this works. Money should be a boomerang, not a frisbee. A boomerang comes back to you. A frisbee, you just throw it and then you don't have your frisbee anymore. You got to go find it and go get it. But a boomerang brings it back to you. So ultimately, when I keep going back to this thing with Deion Sanders and what happened here, I found it really fascinating when I would see people that would say, well, why didn't Jackson State offer Deion a matching offer to Colorado? And I was like, because they don't have the money. They don't have anything near enough money they can't match white people in terms of how much they can pay their coaches. They can't. Colorado has an endowment that is twice as big as the endowment of all the top 10 HBCUs combined. Colorado's got money to burn, and they're not even a big school. Relatively speaking, they're not a rich school. They're an average school. So how in the heck is Jackson State going to match the money that Colorado offers? That's not possible. They can't. Right. So if all you're doing is competing based on money, and we live by a simple rule that says that white people can have whatever they want as long as they pay someone a big enough salary on a job, you're never going to have institutions ever in your community. You will never have an institution. If you look at the history of most great institutions in this country, you will find that every institution is founded by somebody who didn't go chase a job. They had to make a decision not to go chase a job. Some of you have businesses and you can tell stories about how you created your business because you passed up a chance to go back and get a job making instant money because you wanted long-term wealth. You were willing to sacrifice short-term income for long-term wealth. Income and wealth are not the same thing. And a lot of times, when we're thinking job, we're thinking income, income, income. That's it. And so when all you're thinking about is income, you can't really see the wealth. And a lot of times wealth is not even in the form of income. It doesn't even look like money. It comes in the form of control, ownership, equity, things like that, longer term things. And so, so maybe theoretically at Jackson State, they could have been more creative. Maybe they could have said, look, we'll make a we'll make a 5-year deal with you. Well, we'll give you $30 million over the next 5 years. And we're going to bring in people that are going to figure out how to monetize the primetime brand with, name, image, and likeness deals or whatever, so that we can eventually make that money. So maybe if it became more of a partnership or something, and I don't know what conversations happened there. But again, there's no way on earth a Jackson State can compete with a Colorado by playing the white man's game. The white man's game typically is, let's just write the biggest check we can, because our currency is good. Our currency has more value than anybody else's currency. So let's write the biggest check we can, and people will respond to that. And I really encourage you to just realize that you have to have a different currency. You have to have another currency. So think about it like you're in the family business and you're making $80,000 a year. And then somebody offers you a chance to go work in a business that's not related to your family. And let's say it's a factory or something, and they pay you $200,000 a year. So there are two responses, right? Some people would say, I'm going to go take the $200,000 a year because that's much bigger than 80. I'm doing much better. Good for me, right? But then somebody else who's able to see the whole picture, who's not playing checkers, but who's playing chess, who can see the whole chessboard, would say, yeah, I'm only making 80,000 here with my family. But I don't just have income, I have equity. I have ownership, right? So that means that as I'm pouring into this business, I'm increasing my wealth because this business is becoming more valuable because I'm here and because I own it. Over there, I'm just getting paid. I get payment with no equity whatsoever. Here, I get compensation and equity. And when I add the two together, it's pretty good. Number two, you have to care about the people that you're working with. So you're thinking, wait a minute, if I leave here, then that means, my cousin, he maybe he loses his job. The company loses its value. I'm working with my mother. I'm working with family. I'm working with people that I want to see do well. So when I'm thinking about my compensation, I'm adding in the compensation that's going to all the people that are benefiting from my presence, right? That requires a sense of community that doesn't necessarily happen, when you're just thinking job, 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 me, 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 my job, me, job, 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 me, job, me, income, job, gym. When you think about gym, a job, your income, and me, you'll never ever have institutions, because job, income, me, gym will always take you back to the white side of town every single time. There is almost no scenario you can imagine where most black businesses can outbid an established white corporation that's been able to operate for, dozens of years, right? 100 years or more. Jim Crow, Jim, there we go. That's good. I like that. So job, income, and me, Jim, short for Jim Crow, will always take you right back. And it's a perfect analogy because it relates to the legacy of Jim Crow. Why does the University of Colorado have so much money? Well, because they've been stealing from black people for, probably over 100 years, because they've been excluding black people for over 100 years, because white institutions have built themselves on the backs of black labor for hundreds of years. When we read that book, Black Labor, White Wealth, which we went through in extreme detail in this book club, we saw exactly how much wealth they extracted from us and exactly how they did it and how the laws were structured and all that. Don't think Colorado wasn't a part of that. So ultimately, a white institution is going to be able to outbid you because they've been able to run further along the road of wealth than a lot of black institutions. Black institutions have barely been able to operate for just, a couple generations. White institutions have been stealing money from black people for, over a century. Anyway, let me read more of this to you. And I'm going to read more from, this is Powernomics, page 125, Dr. Claude Anderson's book. The website is powernomics.com. And he says, a new orientation. He says, a new orientation for Black America within the framework of a national plan is the practice of group economics. When our ethno-aggregation paradigm is combined with the traditional practice of group economics, it reshapes the concept into ethno-economics. The primary goal of practicing group economics or powernomics is to draw wealth, income, and other resources into Black communities and to make them more economically self-sufficient and competitive. The practice of group economics is not new. To successfully compete, Black entrepreneurs will need some competitive advantages. The action steps proposed later in this chapter are designed to give Black America some of the advantages that whites and other ethnic groups have in the marketplace. Black people are 400 years behind the majority society and various ethnic groups in structuring their own economy. Our new orientation is built on understanding the cycle of wealth production and getting ahead of the curve, not following it. The principles of wealth building, as shown in Figure 12, will repeat themselves just as history does. The wealth cycle will shift from technology to control of resources at some point in the not too distant future. Before that shift occurs, Blacks can position themselves as the lead rather than the hind dog. So, technology, wealth, and new orientation. Where does technology fit into the new orientation of group economics and the cycle of wealth for Blacks? Many social observers and prognosticators argue that access to computers, the information highway, and other advanced technology is the salvation for Black Americans. There is a subtle suggestion that technology is blind to color. Therefore, in theory, it does not matter who owns and controls technology, just as long as Black people have access to it, they can overcome structural racism. This is blatantly untrue. Black people must not be misled by the computer hype and technology euphoria. Technology is and always has been just as much a political tool as it has been an economic tool. Now, notice Dr. Anderson wrote this before we had social media and what was going on with Twitter and Facebook and all that with the bias. You know, you saw how technology was used to kind of structure the arguments during the pandemic. You saw technology being used to censor certain people who have certain views. And it was as plain as day. It was plain as day, but just people just didn't care because they label you as dangerous or something. They label Farrakhan dangerous, even though he doesn't hurt anybody. Then that justifies whatever they choose to do at that point. Structural racism holds Blacks in place as a labor class until new technology comes along and wipes out that place. For example, in the early 1900s, cotton picking machines could pick 50 times more cotton per hour, force Black Americans to leave the cotton fields and move north in search of work. So cotton gins came along, and a lot of Black Americans left the cotton fields and moved to the north. 50 years later, automatic machinery forced most Blacks from the steel mills, automobile and chemical factories of the north into the welfare, criminal, and unemployment roles of urban areas. Black Americans never owned or produced the automation technology that displaced and rendered them an obsolete workforce. In telecommunications, the inventions of the radio, the telephone, and television did not enrich Black people. They received the benefits of using radios, telephones, and television, but those who produced and controlled the technology were the ones who became wealthy. In the new Powernomics orientation, technology is important, but Blacks can compete best by getting ahead of technology and owning and controlling the industries from which technology evolves. Knowing ahead is getting ahead. A new orientation of group economics requires understanding the cycle of wealth. The cycle begins with natural resources, minerals, and precious metals, and then it moves into human labor. Okay, so when I think about natural resources, I'm also thinking about just talent and culture and things like that too, right? And then you move into human labor, especially Black labor, which drove the engines of civilizations around the world. By the mid 1960s, technology had become the great wealth builder. Technology did the heavy lifting, moving, cleaning, and building. We are currently in the fourth phase, the information and manipulation of symbols. Information manipulators and distributors have emerged as the greatest wealth builders ever. They are making untold billions of dollars moving information instead of tangible goods. The next shift will carry us back to the original starting point, natural resources and other tangible goods. Since Blacks have yet to capture the benefit from the technology phase, they could seize a strategically competitive position by advancing directly to the first phase, control of natural resources at the top of the cycle. Build vertical industries and practice group economics. Raw resources stimulate labor, which stimulates production, which stimulates income, which stimulates wealth. Let's think about this, okay? And then let's apply this to our Jackson State conversation. Raw resources stimulate labor, which stimulates production, which stimulates income, which stimulates wealth. Okay, so raw resources. In the case of, say, college football, the raw resources are the talented young men in our community. Those men, every single Black athlete came out of the womb of a Black woman, right? That's it. That's the fertile soil that is producing the best athletes on the planet. We all came from a Black woman. So the Black woman, by extension of the young men and the women too. We know about the great women we produce as well, but we're talking specifically about, say, college athletes. All those men came from the fertile soil of a Black woman. So that makes the Black woman an incredibly powerful and important natural resource that we have. in our community, complete control of in the community. So the question is, at what point is that resource go under the control of the white man? At what point? Because if you have a perfectly vertical industry, then you control that resource from the time it comes out of the ground, or in this case out of the womb. You control that resource from the time it comes out of the womb until the resource has pretty much done its job to the point where it's been distributed, monetized, and everything else. You control it from the beginning to the end, right? Good example, LeVar Ball. See, he's not a perfect example because I think his wife is white, but let's pretend like she's not. His sons all come out of the womb of his wife. LeVar Ball controls that resource in a vertical sense. So because again, it's about production, distribution, monetization, the creation of the resource, the distribution of the resource, and the monetization of the resource. Who gets the bread? Who gets the income and the wealth that comes from that resource? So LeVar, while his sons, were great basketball players, he trained them, he groomed them, he prepared the resource for the world. Then they became great ballers. He was right there next to him at every single basketball game. And then when they go to the NBA, he's taking the brand recognition, the name, image, and likeness, and using that in the creation of a company where the wealth and the income goes back to the family. He didn't hand his kids over to a bunch of Jewish lawyers and agents and managers. He didn't send his kids off to become employees of Adidas or something. He maintained control of that. Now let's compare that to what we see in a lot of other cases. So this resource comes out, a Black woman gives birth to the next LeBron James. That's going to be $1 billion asset in the Black community. And so he comes in, he's living in the hood. He learns how to play basketball. Maybe there's some Black men that show him how to play basketball, whatever, Black kids. He gets really good. He shows some talent. As soon as he shows any ounce, any inkling of potential, what happens? What happens? Well, the vultures are lurking. They see the Black mama in the grocery store with her son who's 11 years old and he's already 6 feet tall. And they see he's muscular built. And so they pull him in, they scout him. They're scouting for resources. They're just like they went through Africa looking for gold and timber and everything. They see dollar signs with your little Black boy. So they go through, they grab, they go up and they befriend the mom, especially if he doesn't have like a father around or whatever. And they say, hey, we got a basketball camp and your son can come on out. And next thing you know, this kid is at a basketball camp. He's showing his talent and he's really great. And then, and then if he's good enough, eventually the AAUs come around. And then, and remember, they have the connection to the next stage of exploitation, which is the universities, right? And then also when he gets to those Nike camps or whatnot, then the corporations start kind of creeping in. Adidas starts kind of lurking in, doing the R. Kelly on your kid. They kind of sneaking around like R. Kelly at the playground, like checking it out, just trying to see what they can get, right? And then next thing you know, this kid is going to a big white university that is going to make millions of dollars from your child. Imagine, let's say he has the talent of a LeBron James. So a university would have probably made $100 million from a LeBron James. This is not Black wealth. Pay attention now. I need y'all to listen. See, in an industry where you vertically control the industry, all that wealth stays with the original source of the wealth, right? The family that produced that kid is getting the bulk of this wealth because they see where things are going. They see they're claiming ownership and control early in the game. But because you don't see the wealth, you're kind of just willy-nilly going along and making these partnership agreements with other people that benefit them tremendously, but don't necessarily benefit you. So by the time this kid is 22 years old and gets to the NBA, where he signs that, $50 million, $100 million contract, he signed let's use the LeBron analogy. He signed a $100 million deal with Nike or Adidas. He has made $100 million for a big white university. He has created hundreds of millions of dollars of white wealth, but none of that wealth could have been created without the womb of the Black woman that gave birth to him. So if she's business savvy, if that family understands economics, then they make partnerships that allow them to be the primary beneficiaries of the creation of that resource. You have to have that vertical integration, that vertical control. That's what, a lot of China, like in China, they do that. If you get a resource out of their country, they'll be damned if they're going to produce the resource and then let you be the primary beneficiary of their resource. So part of the reason that this wealth extraction takes place is because America is a country that is very, very good at capitalism. Capitalism is fundamentally designed to seek out where the resources are and figure out a way to get ahead. So when your kids aren't trained on economics, they get tricked and fooled because the people that they're competing against are thinking about economics from the time they wake up out of bed in the morning. So let me keep going. So he says raw resources stimulate labor. So again, going back to that baby LeBron, he's the raw resource. Raw resource stimulates labor. His labor is all the hours he puts on the basketball court, which stimulates production. So he's producing on the court now. He's producing great performances because he's been, he's been putting in the labor, putting in the work, and which stimulates income. So he's producing. Now, pay attention now. This is funny, right? Produces income. So now that LeBron, this really happened with LeBron. When LeBron's in high school, he has he's the raw resource. He stimulated the labor. He's put in the work. He stimulated the production. He's producing on the court. Now income is being produced. Now ESPN is showing up to LeBron James's games while he's in high school. That income, who's getting that income? Was his mother getting the income? Or was ESPN and the high school and all the other people getting the income except for him? It was ESPN. It was these other entities. You had businesses that were running ads during LeBron James's games during high school. And LeBron, and now here's the thing. This is where Dr. Claude Anderson becomes your friend. He's always your friend, but this is an area where we need to thank God for people like him, because when he talks about black labor, white wealth, he explains how those who are the capitalists that control society create laws that allow them to extract wealth and not you. So what is a law in college sports and high school sports that's been in existence for a long time that made sure that they controlled the flow of the wealth? Well, for many, many years, they had laws in place that said college athletes cannot get paid. Y'all remember that? Now they kind of loosened it up a little bit. They got these name and likeness deals, and still not what it should be, but it's better. It's better. And I've been fighting for that for a long time. I was writing articles on that in 1997. So ultimately, it's now what David, why does David keep putting this vampire culture thing in here? Hey David, I appreciate the energy, brother, but try not to put the same post in here reportedly or repeatedly, because it's distracting the chat just a little bit. So I'm just going to politely ask you if you could not do that anymore. So, but thank you though. I appreciate the enthusiasm. All right. So the point of the matter is to say that at the end of the day, you are talking about a scenario that is designed, even through legislation, to control the flow of wealth, to ensure Black people get their cut, their tiny cut, and that white America, white corporations, et cetera, get the bulk of that money. And so I can keep going, but you get the point. So again, raw resource stimulates labor, which stimulates production, which stimulates income, which stimulates wealth. So the party that gets the income, if they hold on to that income and reinvest it, they are going to get the majority of the wealth. This is why Black people don't have wealth, because what is your wealth plan? When you are producing resources in your community, starting with your young Black athletes, or when you produced hip hop and it became one of the most creative and most interesting art forms around the world, what was your wealth plan to protect and control that which is yours? You got to do that. You have to protect it the same way a father has a beautiful daughter and he knows everybody wants to get to know his daughter, but he's got to protect her, sometimes with a shotgun. He's going to keep her locked in the house for a while, and he's going to vet every boy that says, hey, I want to date your daughter. He's not going to throw his daughter out in the street and wish her the best. He's going to make sure that she's only around a man who is worthy of any sort of interaction with his child. So when you are talking about this, look at this. You got these pieces here, the components here. And in fact, I think we can break it into 5 pieces: production of the raw resource, the labor to develop the resource, the production that comes from the labor, the income that comes from the production, and the wealth that comes from the income. Are you thinking through all five pieces of that cycle, or are you doing what I believe Black people do? We produce the raw resource. We put out the labor. Nobody works harder than Black people. When we put out the labor, we end up doing the production. We sell the core of that product because we're looking for a job. Because now that I've got a resource, what's my resource? My resource is I went to college, I got a degree. Now I have what is called human capital, right? I am the resource now. So and I'm gonna put in the work. I'm gonna work hard, boss. I promise you, I'm gonna work hard. So then I sign a contract called a job. I'm not thinking about building a company. Now, if I build a company, then that means all the labor, which leads to the production, which leads to the income, which leads to the wealth, circles back to me and my family. Do you understand? But because I have been trained to look for a job, what that means is that when I've done steps 1 and 2, creation of the raw resource and the labor necessary to develop the resource, first thing I do is I sell out. I sell. So please, man, ain't nobody hiring me. Why won't nobody hire me? Why won't nobody give me a job? You think the only way to make money in America is with a job? 99% of the money made in America is not made from a job. Most money that's made in America is made from ownership of an asset. So I'm not making fun of the job thing. I'm not getting mad at you. I get it. I was raised on the same thing. But they raise you, they teach you how to sell out early. Because they basically planted in your brain when you go to that white public school with that little white lady teaching you in the class every day, they teach you that your job is to produce the resource, put in the work, and then prepare yourself to be productive so that you can then sell all that to a corporation or to some other organization or some other entity that has nothing to do with your community. You get out of the hood. Now that you're good, now that you're valuable, your job now is to evacuate the building so you can sell it to the cheapest bidder. So what I'm saying to you, and this is why I created the Black Business School, is to help you understand the entire cycle of the process. You're only finishing half the damn book. You're going to stage 1 and stage 2, and you forget about 3, 4, and 5. That's when you get the rewards for all the work that you put in. You produce the value. Now you got to learn how to extract the value. This means that when our kids are learning how to be prepared to be great employees or whatever and highly skilled and all this other stuff, we also teach them how to extract the wealth from that skill. That comes from things like entrepreneurship, sales, networking and partnerships, with other Black people, right? Institutional development, the ability to raise capital. All those are skills that almost seem like Chinese to most of us as Black people because we're not raised on any of that. I bet you if I did a survey and said how many of y'all were raised on, how to start businesses, how to raise capital, how to make a sale, and how to find a customer, 99% of us would say no, including me. Including me. I had to learn these things in my 30s. But let me tell you a little secret. When I learned those things, guess whose family wealth shot up dramatically? And I had a good job. I was paid very well. I was making 6 figures. I walked away from a 6-figure job to create the businesses that I own right now. So really, this is what I'm hoping that you see when you're talking about, when you're having these debates. If all you can see is the job, then you're not even seeing 80% of the process. Let me keep going. The foundations of wealth are cyclical. Our global economy is presently in the information phase of wealth formation. The 4th phase of the wealth creation cycle, information manipulation, is virtual. Granted, information technology is extremely valuable, but at some point in the 4th phase, it will become a perishable resource. Technology will falter and humans will be at risk. The value of technology-driven information will decrease, while the value of tangible goods and human labor will increase. Devaluation can be triggered by man-made causes such as computer viruses, accidents, or uncontrollable natural disasters. That's a good point. I always wonder what would happen if the electrical grid goes out. from a solar flare or something, or there's a nuclear war. All this internet, this whole internet, everything is done. It's over forever at that point, right? So let's make good with this as long as we can. Any of these events could drive the wealth building cycle back to the beginning, which is natural resources. The group that controls these resources will be in the driver's seat. Thus, Black America can get ahead by jumping ahead. In past wealth cycles, society was able to store goods and services from each wealth building phase because they were tangible, like the natural resources of land, water, and food. They could be stored for prosperity and the enjoyment of future generations, whether it was from a farm, automobile factory, or hospital. It could be stored in warehouses, books, or libraries, or even in burial tombs. Yet, in our computer driven world, when computer users are constantly admonished to save backup copies of their work, what happens when information based goods and services are destroyed or disappear for any reason? The United States is abandoning its material existence and giving up its resources to other countries. If cyberspace technology fails for whatever reason, there will be a mad scramble to regain the natural resources the nation abandoned. If blacks are the most vulnerable group of people, why are they following white people down a road of complete dependence on technology? If technology fails and white society becomes disabled, blacks will be even more vulnerable. With Powernomics, Black America has an opportunity to move into place and establish itself as a backup producer and owner of material resources. How Black Americans can acquire material resources to compete today, as well as prepare for the negative impact of globalization, is discussed in Chapter 6. Interesting. Wow, this is going to be really good. I think we've covered a lot for today. I think we've done an hour, and I hope that this benefited you. I hope that there were some things we all learned today. Just think about that. I want you to process that and understand. When somebody goes to get a job, that somebody had to create that job, and the person who created the job is typically making more money than the person who has the job. So whenever a job is created, it would be a good exercise to think about, like, how did that person get the money to pay me? The money doesn't come out of some magical vacuum cleaner. It comes from the fact that they're taking this, production. You're producing something with your labor. They're taking whatever you produce and they're generating income from that thing. That income translates into wealth. You have to see the whole cycle of the system in order to understand how that game is played. Because if you just get caught up in the whole jobs thing, that's just not a winning strategy. So to summarize, I guess, in terms of the whole conversation with Deion Sanders, it was really mixed. It was such a hard conversation for me because I wanted to see HBCUs prosper, and I don't think you can put everything on Deion. It's not all his fault. There are black celebrities that could have came in and wrote checks to maybe get him to stay or something like that. That's all out there, right? But I think at the same time, so it's not even really a matter of blaming anybody. It's really a matter of saying, or maybe blaming ourselves, blaming our whole culture. Our institutions don't grow because we abandon them. As soon as something better comes along or something that pays more money in the short term, we leave. So imagine if every man or left his wife every time a pretty girl came along that was going to give him good sex for about 2 weeks or something, right? He would be out. So there has to be some underlying value that makes the man stay there. Even when his wife is getting on his nerves, even when his wife doesn't look the way she looked 20 years ago, even when she's not the best available option to him at that moment. If there's no underlying value, if his only value system is, I want to be with the prettiest girl right now, then he'll never ever be able to build a family. He'll never ever be able to stay married. It won't work. It won't work. Marriage does not work for people that are one-dimensional thinkers. So if your one criteria for where a Deion Sanders should be is how much money can Deion Sanders make, and you're not thinking about all the people that are impacted by his decision or all the long-term, short-term benefits of him being associated with a black institution, then you might as well just say, okay, I get it. He's supposed to just hop to wherever the money's best and not really build much of anything. And that's the kind of thing. That's probably the part that kind of got to me. But I don't think Deion thinks that way about everything. I know he's got sons and stuff like that, and he's really devoted to his sons, and I admire that. And I don't think he would drop his son just because a better quarterback came along, or drop, get rid of one of his kids because he found another kid that would be more fun to hang out with. So we pick and choose our battles, and some of us are built for that whole, institution building, a life, and some of us just, are on a different wavelength. And so Just in case you're wondering, I will never leave the Black Business School for any reason. There is no job on earth that they can offer me that would cause me to leave you. So I'm going to be here for good. This is the Black institution that I'm building, and I've dedicated my life to it, and so is my wife. Somebody said, "How's your mom?" You know, she's fighting through health challenges. So I appreciate you for asking. Thank you very much, Kabibi. And somebody asked about Christmas. During Christmas week, I know my wife and I are traveling, but I'm gonna pretty much, the plan is to do the book club every week consistently. And in the URL for the book club or for the life class, where you can log in and get access to all the other free stuff, is blackkeystogreatness.com. That's blackkeystogreatness.com. And last but not least, if you want to join us Friday, we're doing multifamily real estate with Julian Gordon. If you're interested in buying some real estate and generating income in that way, he's really, really good. So he's our dean of real estate in the Black Business School. So you can go to boycewatkins.com, and the link is right there. And I hope you guys will join us on Friday night. So have a good night, everybody. I'll see you soon. Thank you for hanging out with me. Bye-bye.